All right, so I'm back with another video, putting together some thoughts for my Goodreads account. This one's a little bit different. I'm going to be talking about a graphic novel. This is Batman Volume 1 that was recently published. The author is Matt Fraction. And I'm excited to talk about it because I am a big comics fan, specifically DC Comics. But I've kind of fallen off of comics for a little while, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit. I I didn't like grow up reading comics per se, but I was really big into all of the DC characters. Specifically, Batman's always been my favorite, but Batman the animated series, Superman the animated series, the Justice League animated series, and there were others too. I like grew up on that stuff, and I absolutely loved it. I think those shows still hold up and are really good. But I think my interest in the actual like physical comics came from after the video game Batman Arkham Asylum came out in, I think it was 2009. I was just in awe of that game, and I think it did such a good job of like introducing the lore of so many different characters and villains and the kind of Batman universe. And it was after I played that game that it got me really wanting to dive in and read, especially Batman comics. So I started by reading kind of just like older, really famous graphic novels, and that's what kind of really got me into it. And then I believe it was 2011, DC announced their newest continuity, which was the New 52. That's when I jumped on like current, you know, comic issues that were being released, and I was absolutely all into it. I loved it, especially the Batman run by Scott Snyder. I think is still probably my favorite comic run of all time. I've read it all the way through twice now. I've been thinking about doing a reread of it, and I'll probably put videos up whenever I do to kind of have those thoughts for myself on this channel later on. But so yeah, I mean, I really got into the New 52. I read more series than just. I mean, they had multiple Batman series. They had Detective Comics was still going. They had a Batman and Robin story, which had Batman and his son Damian Wayne. I thought that one was excellent. I read through the Justice League series that Jeff Johns worked on. There was I read some of his Green Lantern arc as well, and I really like the New 52. And that kind of took me all the way through when they relaunched their continuity to DC Universe Rebirth. And I mean, I was on board, and I was like, I was getting the first issues of all these different new runs they were doing for these characters. And I just, specifically Batman, I really just could not get into. I think Tom King, who's an amazing writer, who's done work on Supergirl and Vision and other things, I just really couldn't get into the Batman run. I read the first like 11, 12 issues or so and just totally fell off of it. I also just didn't really care for the art style. And I kind of just gradually, over the course of however long that was, year or two, I just kind of fell off of it and haven't really been back since. I do know that they issued kind of like, or started their new continuity again. I think it's called All In, and it specifically or broadly centers around their absolute universe, which is kind of like different variations of, characters kind of telling different-ish versions of their story. And characters around them. I've heard that, again, I love Scott Snyder. I've heard that his absolute Batman run is excellent. That's what I'm probably going to read next. But then I saw that they were restarting Batman with a Volume 1, which is, they say, only the fourth time that there's ever been a Batman #1 in all of DC's history, which I think is awesome. So it felt like a really good point to just kind of jump back into it. And I'm really glad that I did, and I think I'm going to stick with it. I will say that just right off the bat, I mean, I really like the art style. It's way more kind of up my alley of what I prefer, as opposed to the Rebirth Batman arc. I also think that this is more in the vein of kind of that Scott Snyder run, and that's just what I really enjoyed. So I think that had it positives going for it. I also really like the new Batman suit. There's a lot of blue in it, obviously, so it's kind of old school in that sense. But one of the things in this collects volumes 1 through 6, And there's a heavy emphasis on emphasizing like different like accessories or gadgets of Batman and kind of using that side of him more so than even like his like tactical fighting skills. And there's kind of these like little inserts in a lot of the images that say like what the gadget is that he's using and how it works and things like that. And I think that adds kind of a little bit to sometimes where you can't get like in just like one or two comic frames, you can't see like a lot of the action unfolding. I think it kind of helps you understand like what he's using and what's really going on there. So I love the art style. I think the story itself, I think it does a good job of as kind of being an introduction. I would say that not like a ton happens, but again, this is just the first 6 issues. So I think it does a good job of kind of establishing our main players. Again, I'm not really big on the current continuity. So like Commissioner Gordon, as he's typically known, is not the police commissioner anymore. It's a guy named Vandal Savage, which I had never heard of before. And so I'm assuming that happened before, but he's introduced as kind of just this like really gruff, like militarized style police commissioner that uses any means necessary and really has it out for Batman. And that's going to become a huge plot point, I'm sure. And there's, I think the kind of like main enemy that's going to, take over the course of this entire run. His name is the Minotaur, which I'm not familiar with. He might be a character that is, has popped up in past issues, but I'm not exactly sure. There's Killer Croc is in this. He's actually in the very first issue, and it kind of represents this kind of like question. I guess it's kind of thematic. I'm sure it'll come back in broader ways, but there's a question of like, with some of these criminals that have these like really severe alter egos, about like rehabilitation versus kind of just like imprisonment. And I think there's a lot that they try to say there, and there's going to be more that they go into. So I thought that was interesting. I think my favorite issue was the second, where Robin is in this. It's Tim Drake and Damian Wayne are in this, and I just loved Tim Drake. I think his costume, or his whatever you call it, his suit is really, really good. I love the art style and the prominent red and yellow that they use. And it's an interesting one where both him and Batman are targeted by the police and they both get injured. And I think it introduces just a lot of human dynamics between Bruce and Tim Drake that I really enjoyed seeing. I think that was my favorite issue for that reason. It felt the most human to me, but also it had some kind of good action set pieces. The Riddler also features very, very, very briefly. And then there's a doctor that's working in kind of like the experimental section of Wayne Enterprises. Her name is Dr. Zeller, and seems like Bruce Wayne and her like are kind of become in a relationship kind of a thing, but it's kind of like, will they, won't they? And she's the one that's kind of working on this experimental technology medicine to kind of like help some of these criminals. And that's why Bruce Wayne kind of gets involved with her, but she is definitely like under attack towards the later back part of the issues. And she ultimately ends up learning that Bruce Wayne is Batman, which I think is interesting. There's also the Penguin is in this very briefly, kind of like on this like crime syndicate underneath the Minotaur. Hugo Strange is in it, and he's targeting Dr. Zeller. So I think there's cool kind of cameos from these characters, even if they're in like different ways from what we expect. And like I mentioned, Damian Wayne is in this and really is kind of like struggling to come into his own, and he's still pretty young. So there's like a lot of those like dynamics between him and Bruce that I think will have to get ironed out, which is great. And we're kind of left in a pretty harrowing spot at the end of this issue, where Tim Drake gets hurt and he kind of tells Bruce he wants to step away. Bruce has an issue with Damian because of how he acted in a certain point in time. Then you have Dr. Zeller, who just was almost killed, and there's a lot happening, but I think that he does a good job of kind of setting up like one issue is kind of its own standalone thing with like a new character or a character that pops up, and but it seems like it's kind of building broadly to something bigger that will continue. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I think that it's maybe not the most consistent across issues, but by and large, as a set in this graphic novel, I think it is good. Again, I think the artistry is really good, especially Batman's suit. I think there's some cool images of Bruce as he's still in his suit, but he has like the cowl off, which I think is kind of a cool look, and that features in here a few times. And same thing with Robin. So yeah, there's a lot to like here, and I think it's a fun jumping on point for a lot of people who maybe haven't been up on the current continuity. And so I'm definitely going to be continuing to read this. I think the second volume is not published until like November, December or something like that. So whenever it's out, I'll pick it up and read it. But yeah, I'm just really glad that this is out and gave me a reason to kind of get back into it. And it's got me looking at some of these other runs that I've missed, especially some of the newer ones. So I'm looking forward to getting back into it. I think I would give this a 3.5. I think it's good, and does a good job of, again, like laying the groundwork, but it feels like there's a lot more to come. But for what it is, I very much enjoyed this.